Hello, and welcome to Plug and Play, our newest show on River City Gamers. I'm Angel Halo, and today we're going to be looking at the Logitech F310 Gamepad for the PC.
This is the gamepad itself made by Logitech, who had previously made a bunch of video game accessories in the past, and pretty good audio devices too. So they've been in the business for a while now. At first glance, it's heavily similar to both the Xbox 360 and PS3 controllers. In fact, it looks like some sort of strange offspring of both. You know when a mommy controller and a daddy controller come together? Right. The controller itself, as soon as I touch it here, the controller itself feels well molded and pretty comfortable. The triggers feel right, the buttons feel fine, the analog sticks are great. The only main worry I had of this controller was the D-pad itself. It's just like the D-pad on the Xbox 360 controller, and if you ever talk to anyone who played platformers and fighting games with this thing, they may say that it's not very accurate. Thankfully, it's mostly averted in this case, as there is a slight lock on the D-pad when you press down in a straight direction. It feels pretty clicky, kind of like switch boxes on a joystick. Pretty hard to describe otherwise, but it is an improvement, as I will demonstrate in a moment. Now then, it will plug straight into your PC running Windows XP or above and should work straight from the computer. It has also been confirmed that this controller can work on iOS and Linux operating systems, though it may require some work to be done in order for them to function. Now let's get with the demonstration. Now I'm just breezing through some random PC games with controller support. I've played through a variety of different video games and found that the pad has been consistently responsive and suitable for just about every game I played. Castlevania Lords of Shadow performs amazingly with its fluent controls, and since this version is being ran on 1080p at 60 frames per second, really helps its case. The PC version so far is way better than the console versions. Castle Crashers play just as well as you'd expect from the original Xbox Live Arcade release, and you can plug in multiple controllers to enjoy local multiplayer. Fun game, by the way. I'm able to keep up a decent combo with Arkham Origins and its responsive controls. It's always fun beating up on the bad guys in a bat suit, and I ended up playing through this and Arkham City with a controller, and it felt right at home with one. This is a really fun Batman game, if a little flawed. Playing a first-person shooter like Payday 2 works pretty well, though it did feel weird at first considering I had to use the triggers to fire and aim. This is because the controller reminds me of the PlayStation 3 controller and how it feels, but I did get used to it and had an enjoyable experience. Great game also, I highly recommend it, especially to play with your friends on, though it could have benefited from a split-screen mode. Trackmania Nations Forever had tight driving controls, and I was able to stay in control of my own car all the time. I remember really enjoying this game back then, and I still do. It still looks beautiful, and it's a great free racing game. The Walking Dead Season 2, well, you can use a controller if you really want to. The controller worked well for Season 1, and it works just as well here in Season 2, though personally, I'd play a game like this with a mouse and keyboard. Not a bad start, it's a tough act to follow after the first season, though personally, I'd wait until the other episodes start pouring in. This controller feels right at home with Injustice, feeling tight, responsive, and it feels like it could endure some abuse in fighting game tournaments. Not a bad PC version also, unless you want to talk about online play, but that's territory I never charted, so I can't say. Resident Evil 6. You either love it or hate it. I hate it as a Resident Evil game, but man do I love the gameplay. It's a complicated relationship, but my point is, one neat feature of this gamepad is the ability to switch between X input and direct input. To put it in layman terms, the X input is the most recent gamepad driver, and as Resident Evil 6 demonstrates if you pay attention to the command prompts, it's similar to how it works on the Xbox 360 gamepad. In fact, that controller utilizes X input on PC. Direct input is more of what an old basic gamepad would use, with just a simple press of a switch and resetting the game, and Resident Evil 6 is now using direct input. This feature can be useful for games that only support one or the other, like the one coming up next. Another useful feature on this gamepad is best described like this. This is Manos, the Hands of Fate, an independent platformer based on a not very good movie.
Oh, there, better.
Mike, I'm scared.
Of what?
It has controller support, but it seems to only utilize the left analog stick for movement, with no means to change it. Fret not, if I press at the mode button, I am using my D-pad. Wow. Yeah, what basically happens is that the D-pad traded functionality with the left analog stick. One last thing to mention, and I think you can relate to me on this one. Don't you hate it when your favorite PC games that look like they could have controller support doesn't support a controller? Well, if you install the Gamepad with a switch to direct input and visit the Logitech official website, you can be eligible for a free download of the Logitech Game Profiler. This is a key to joy emulator similar to Xpadder. You can assign keyboard commands onto your gamepad, and this can work with just about any video game on your PC. Let's try out Quake on the DirectQ source port. This source port supports DirectX, which is one of the only ways I'm able to play this game on this television in particular. And after finding out the controls for each key and customizing when necessary, fiddling around with adding keystrokes, determining what buttons to assign them to, and then wow, we're enjoying Quake on the Logitech controller. What a timeless classic, though I highly recommend playing this with DirectQ to keep it up to date. Now for VVVVV, is that how it goes? Well, okay, let's try to play it. And there we go. Well, let's just say this got pretty frustrating. How embarrassing. Well, it turns out that running the profile by this method doesn't always work, which can happen due to a variety of reasons, but thankfully you can force it to work. And here's how you do it. Okay. Now you go into Options, Global Profiler Settings, and click Apply Persistent Profile and select the profile. That way, no matter what happens, your controller will always work. Now, let's try again. And yes, VVVVV, can I just call it V6? Or Roman numeral 6? Anyway, it's an alright puzzle platformer and it works fluently with this gamepad. Just press button and move. I even assigned the ability to go to the escape menu for good measure. The Binding of Isaac. I made the controls work to where you move the D-pad or left analog stick and shoot with the buttons or right analog stick and assign the rest of the commands on the shoulder buttons, and it works really well. Once you get past the tedium of assigning keystrokes and commands and all, you can feel really pleased about how it all works afterwards. Good game, by the way. Alone in the Dark, a classic survival horror game, but I gotta say, even with the gamepad, the controls haven't aged. I don't know why, but Resident Evil did their controls much better. Not that it's a bad game though, it's definitely worth checking out for anyone curious about one of the granddaddies of survival horror games. At last, Killing Floor. This was the tedious of them all to assign commands to, but is it worth it? Well, yeah, I'm playing Killing Floor with a controller. I sort of have it to where it's a mix of Call of Duty and Half-Life 2 and Rainbow Six Vegas to be in total control of my character, and it does work. And very well, may I add. Great game, by the way. I highly recommend it. With this, you can have almost any unsupported game work on your gamepad. I should also note that you can get this software with just about any direct input Logitech pads. That is an awesome package so far. It's not the best software out there, and it's not exactly the most self-explanatory one available, but it gets the job done. Now, I've done what I could to show off how it can go on PC. Now let's see how it works on the PlayStation 3. Yes, I'm serious. Now, this is how it works. Now, just situating. Okay, there we go. Now, you set your gamepad to direct input, as seen here. Just making sure. And then, we plug it in. Just like that. Now, just to situate this a little better. And there we go. And there. Now, quick demo, and the D-pad works pretty well. As you can see, I can navigate the XMB, I think is what it's called. Now then, depending on what other controllers are plugged in before it determines what slot it is assigned to. If no other controller is on, it'll be player 1. And if there is one, it'll be player 2, and so on. Now the big question is, does it work? Well, I played through the entirety of The Last of Us with just this controller, and I was pleasantly surprised by how well this controller worked. Every control was spot on, and I had a really good experience of this game. I highly recommend it if you want a long enough single-player game that has throwbacks to classic survival horror gameplay. Now for something even more intense, like Anarchy Rings, a spiritual successor to Mad World for the Wii. This is a budget title brawler with a multiplayer mode, fun to play, and a nice new take on the beat-em-up genre. And here is some good old Bloody War 2 going on. What a great fighting game with polished controls, a diverse cast of characters, and just a really fun game to play overall, and one of the more unique fighters with the way it did its story mode. The controller is great for fighting games like Injustice, and it's about the same with a game like this. Works very fluently. And finally, some good old Resistance, a launch title for the PlayStation 3, and it still looks good and plays good today. Perhaps much better than every other entry in the series besides the PSP one. And it's a great throwback to classic FPS elements. Highly recommend it if you haven't played it yet. Oh, and the controller works great on this game as well. The only downside is that there does exist games that require to use the 6-axis. Well, not this game. This is Rayman for the PlayStation 1. Anyway, some games require to use the 6-axis, which this gamepad obviously doesn't have. So, with games like Uncharted Drake's Fortune, it'll only work with this thing, or other third-party controllers that have it. The 6-axis, I mean. So, there are some games that just won't work with the gamepad, but it's mainly the earlier ones. Another thing is that the guide button has no functionality for the PlayStation 3, so if you want to access the XMB at any time, I recommend having another controller turned on or a PlayStation 3 remote to access the XMB at any time. Now, let's take a moment to sink this in. This is a controller that works just like, if not better, than the controllers on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. It can work with anything with X input and most games with direct input, and it grants you access to a free Key to Joy emulator to map your own buttons. On top of that, it is a near-perfect third-party controller that I'd even consider using as a replacement for my PlayStation 3 controllers. All this for $24.99. You can't possibly go wrong with this. Now, one last thing to mention is that there does exist a wireless version for about $49.99, and that one has a vibration feedback built in. So if you're looking for an excellent controller to use for your computer, or just a second PlayStation 3 controller, all at an efficient price, I highly recommend it. Wow, I haven't uploaded in decades, or more like a long while. Sorry. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. This is more of an informative video, so if I bore you to tears, I apologize, I won't do it again. If you liked my video, please rate it and consider subscribing to the River City Gamers YouTube channel for more content that we collaborate on. Also, if you want, please check out my YouTube channel at AngelHalo017 and my Twitter for the latest tweets from me. Oh, and be sure to visit the River City Gamers website to see our content on there first before you see them elsewhere, and like us on Facebook for any more updates. Speaking of videos, you can watch those 3 down there, including the first Plug and Play episode on the bottom right by WizWar100. All links to everything I've asked you to go, in case you can't click on them, will be in the description below. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.
Seen it.
I wish those hands would just push him over.